Okay. I'm going to set the clock. I hope one day to be able to look back at these with posterity and remember how dark and depressed I am in this very moment. And where I make it to when I'm looking back. I'm excited for that day. I'm excited for that moment. I hope I remember to look back at these. A lot of anxiety, a lot of stress in the world, in my body. Okay, page 177. Same book. Suddenly the enormity of their negligence dawns upon them. They look up. They see me already at the end of the corridor. They drop the enchanted box which has decoyed them from the path of duty. They start towards their pikes. Some mysterious force holds them chained to the floor. Bulger is doing splendid work. My hand is on the door of the audience chamber. Smitten with a superstitious dread of some unseen power, the guards stand rooted to the spot. A low whistle tells Bulger that his task is complete. He flashes through the corridor like a spirit. We enter the vestibule of the audience chamber. We pass through the outer apartment. We stand in the presence of Slim Lim, Lord of the Peacock Feather. Slim Lim was at home. He was. I didn't say wasn't. He was. He was seated in the center of the spacious apartment, sipping a cup of very fragrant tea, the aroma of which was so fascinating that I passed and inhaled it with all the gusto of a fine taster. Two ladies, clad in robes of great beauty and richness, were busy brewing tea and spreading before the Lord Dao Dai an infinite number of delicate viands and toothsome tidbits, but he ate nothing. He was eventually somewhat disturbed by my sudden appearance, and I could see that one thought, to the exclusion of all others, was occupying his mind. It was, how did this stranger pass the guards? True, he is small, but if he can calmly walk into my apartment, why not an evil-disposed person do likewise? Determined to convince Slim Lim and the ladies of his household of my noble lineage and refined manners, I kowtowed with all the grace of a veteran courtier and began the enumeration of their various virtues, excellencies, and charms of body and mind. When I had reached number 117, the victory was complete. They smiled. But Slim Lim remained obdurate. Obdurate? He gazed into vacancy for several moments and then pretended to fall asleep. I recited the purpose of my visit and waited patiently for the Lord of the Peacock Feather to deign to reply. He did so at last, but with opening his eyes, speaking as in a half-dream. Barbarian, son of a barbarian, grandson of a barbarian, great-grandson of a barbarian, great-great-grandson of a barbarian, great-great-great-grandson of a barbarian. Well, knowing that this was a mere ruse to waste the night in words, I resolved to put it to an end at once. I sat down and interrupted Slim Lim's long and dreary list by pretending to snore with that regularity which proves the accomplished sleeper. He came to a sudden halt. A deep silence now settled upon the scene, only broken by the nervous rattle of the ladies' fans. Slim Lim now began to realize that he had no ordinary mortal before him. For the first time he looked me squarely in the face. The ladies grew alarmed at the dark cloud gathering on the brow of their liege lord and withdrew to the other end of the room. The Dao Dai was now wide awake. So was I. Bold, thoughtless, and ill-counseled stranger, he cried out, by the decree of the child of the sun, him of the sacred countenance, it is not lawful to punish a rash petitioner like thee, provided his prayer be one that may be granted. But what thou askest is impossible. For at this hour there is neither paper, ink, nor brush within the palace. Thou must suffer for thy rash conduct. Thou hast been cunning enough to pass the guards in coming hither, but already a score of pikes are leveled at thy breast. Escape is impossible. Prepare for death or imprisonment in dungeon cell which knows neither light nor warmth. Oh. To speak the truth, my legs bent beneath the weight of my body as these cruel words made clear to me the danger I was in. I could see that tears had gathered in the eyes of the two gracious ladies standing near me. Paper, ink, brush, I murmured, half dazed. Paper, brush, paper, ink, or death. It must not be. I glanced about me. I closed my eyes. I fixed my gaze on Bulger, but all in vain. No help came to me. A cold perspiration stood on my brow. Suddenly a huge parrot, which was perched on a bamboo cage at one end of the room, uttered a harsh cry. Quicker than it takes to tell it, I called Bulger to my side and set him teasing the bird. He was not averse to enter upon the sport. When it was well under way, I approached the bird from the rear, and as he bent forward to repel Bulger's familiarity, I deftly laid hold of one of his longest tail feathers and pulled it out. An ear-splitting yelp went up, and the two ladies threw themselves towards their pet with 1,000 tearful expressions of pity and endearment. I now turned my attentions to Slim Lim. Drawing a pair of tiny shears from my pocket, I caught the end of his queue and snipped off an inch of it. My audacity struck him dumb. He could only stare at me with wide-open mouth. I set to work now in good earnest. Drawing some silk threads from my sleeve, I fitted the hair into the quill with such nimble, cunning fingers that Slim Lim looked quite awestruck. "The brush is ready, Lord of the Peacock Feather," I cried, laying it down in front of him. "And the paper, too," I continued, drawing out a paper map from under a curio and turning up the white underside. He followed my movements as a child would those of a necromancer. Ink now was only lacking. With one of my most winning smiles, I drew near the ladies and thus addressed them. "Fasten forever the images of your beautiful faces upon the pages of my memory by lending me the jar of ebon pigment with which you add luster to those matchless arches that shade your eyes." They returned my smile with entrancing grace and sweetness. "Stop. I thought you were growling at your food. Stop. No, go eat your own food. I have some eggs right here." I set now to work in good earnest. Oh, wait. Ink now was only lacking. With one of my most winning smiles, I drew near the ladies and thus addressed them. "Fasten forever the images of your beautiful faces upon the pages of my memory by lending me the jar of ebon pigment with which you add luster to those matchless arches that shade your eyes." They returned my smile with entrancing grace and sweetness, but what was more pleasing still, they granted my request. Halting for a moment at the cage of my friend, the parrot who ruffled his feathers and eyed me most suspiciously to moisten the pigment of his drinking vessel, well, the damn timer. I must turn the timer off. Okay. Halting for a moment at the cage of my friend, the pigment from his drinking vessel, I then strode with an air of triumph back to the table, where Slim Lim sat nervously fanning himself, and said, "Most noble Lord of the Peacock Feather, thy dull-witted, misshapen, and worthless slave hath prepared brush, ink, and paper. Deign to set thy most honorable sign manual to this paper, so that he may withdraw his poor, miserable body and limbs from beneath thy sacred roof." So saying, I held out the brush to Slim Lim. With trembling hand, he took hold of it and rapidly traced the mysterious characters which were destined to open every gate and unbar every door until I stood once more on shipboard, bound for my native land. Folding up the precious document, I thrust it into my sailor's pouch, but while I was flushed with victory, Slim Lim showed only too plainly that he was nearly beside himself with chagrin and vexation. The ladies of his household approached him with most profound obeisance, and with loud and deep-drawn sighs at every step. But Slim Lim repulsed them in the rudest manner. He would have none of their sympathy, none of their pity, or tender offices. They redoubled their efforts. Their sighs became more tender and louder. It was all in vain. Slim Lim was determined not to be propitiated. Turning to me, he cried out, Let the barbarian, son of the barbarian, the grandson of the barbarian, the great-great-grandson of a barbarian, the great-great-great-grandson of a barbarian, and the great-great-grandson of a barbarian, and the four greats of a barbarian, inscribe his wretched, worthless, mean, common, ordinary, insignificant, and despicable name upon a sheet of paper ere he goes forth, so that I and my children, and my children's children, and my children's children's children, and my children's 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 may speak it with contempt. And then, in order to prove to me that he considered himself disgraced to sit in my presence, he threw himself full length upon the floor. Bulger got it into his head that this strange proceeding was in some way a menace to me, for he walked cautiously around Slim Lim, sniffing him and growling in a threatening way, as if to say, "Don't play any tricks on my little master, or it will go hard with you." The ladies of Slim Lim's household were nearly crazed with grief and anxiety. I assured them of my protection, but this only seemed to increase their solicitation. To tell the truth, however, I was not half so calm as I appeared to be. Cruel fate seemed to have woven her meshes about me once again. Slim Lim, with deep cunning, had another task for me, which seemed so impossible with performance that he doubtless was already congratulating himself and applauding his own skillfully devised plan for holding me prisoner. We'll start there tomorrow, yeah? See, I gotta fix that. How do I do that? I don't want to make sure that's up all night. Talking to myself. Okay, so we started on page 177. We ended on page 180. Quit procrastinating on anything and everything. Time wasted is just that, wasted. Avoid distractions and the noise around me. Block it out. The art of continuous self-love through food, through water intake, through intentional meditation and thought. Something inside of me is superior to circumstance. Is it kind? Is it true? Does it reflect my authentic self? Focus more on money and its education. Focus more on self-discipline. See the sun, honor the moon. Forward momentum. The path out of hell is through misery. Honor my journey. We are slaves to our own incessant urges to escape the present moment. Meditate, walk, journal, stretch. Animals, love animals. Leave life to wonder all it needs. Less stress, more fairy tale. Work on bettering the love I show my body through the food and beverage I put in it. With many, it's not what you make, but what you keep. With money, it's not what you make, but what you keep. Focus. Lose any ties to victim mentality. Continue to love yourself. All right. Ta-da! 177. All right, bye.